Welcome back to Beyond the Helmet. I'm your host, Steve McGrath, and today I get to chop it up with one of my favorite former Iowa Hawkeyes, none other than 12-year NFL vet, a guy that's been spending his time podcasting since then, doing a couple things with the Cole Group, donating his time where he sees fit. It is none other than Colin Cole. Colin, how are you doing today, man?
Steve, I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me on the show. I'm excited for this opportunity, bud.
I appreciate you taking the time. I actually got a chance to talk recently, but 6 or 7 months ago with Jack Heflin, who is a recent grad transfer to Iowa. So, man, Iowa in Coach Ferentz's time, just a 20-year tradition of just men in the trenches. You helped usher that in as part of his first recruiting class. Just from the jump, there's something special about schools that have traditions, in particularly Iowa, where I think Coach might be now the longest tenured coach. What is it about what he was able to do and build there? What is so special about Coach Ferentz that he's been able to set up this, in my opinion, a ridiculously positive, incredible tradition that so few people could ever duplicate?
I would say one of the first things that Coach Ferentz brings to the table when he decided to take on the helm of being head coach for the Iowa Hawkeyes had to be the experience of being an offensive line coach. The ability to go out and recruit and really go after young athletes that aren't necessarily some of the top tier athletes, but are able to transition those guys into top tier type athletes, especially along that offensive line. And the biggest part of that is, even though it's offensive line and myself being a defensive lineman, really go hand in hand, considering both kind of work together, opposingly on a daily basis. So I was definitely the beneficiary of having Coach Ferentz be the offensive line coach and working directly with the product of what he was putting on the field. So a lot of good athletes along both of those sides of the ball, but regardless, I would say that Coach Ferentz's methods of being, having the years in the NFL working for the Cleveland Browns and then Baltimore Ravens, I think he's utilized those experiences and used those throughout his program for the last 20 some odd years. And it's a tried and true program, and regardless of what the season holds for us, regardless of the amount of wins or losses that end up in the win-loss tanks, we know what the Iowa program is. We know what we're going to expect. And we just expect those guys to go out and execute. And we know we have some great firepower in terms of talent, and that's what we do. We were able to, coach is able to identify those young athletes early and able to get them on with our roster. And it's been able to do it consistently over the last 20 some odd years.
He certainly has. But just not that what you just said didn't make sense, but his first year, it's a 1-win team. Can you, and of course, very talented guys that are on that roster that you grow into their own. You guys develop year in, year out, get a couple more wins each year. But can you put your finger on what it was about that group of guys that go from 1 win, fast forward a few years later, you guys are 11-win team going into playing, Carson Palmer's USC team. I mean, that sort of transformation is special. You don't see turnarounds like that very often.
No question. But what I think one of the main things that was a part of the whole tradition, what started there was a foundation of understanding. You build your team starting from the middle, moving out from the front line, moving back. And he started with building the offensive line, taking guys who may not have been starters on other teams, particularly at their positions, but transitioning those guys into offensive linemen. Guys like Eric Steinbach, who who came to Iowa as a tight end, ended up making a transition to offensive guard. Bruce Nelson is another guy that came to Iowa as a tight end, made a transition to center, as well as Robert Gallery, who I know a lot of people know about that. And there have been a number of those types of stories that have happened over the 20 years of Coach Ferentz's tenureship. So it's, to go from that 1-10 season and a lot of the bumps that started that along that tenureship, really, the foundation was built within that first and second year. You obviously have to find your roster. You got to fill your roster, and you got to find guys that can do what the schemes that you're looking for and have those, and so to find guys that can kind of fit what we were looking for with the what the scheme was looking for, especially offensively with Coach Philbin and, what he being an offensive line coach, he definitely had a lot of work to do with the guys that he had in the room, but transition those guys. And those are just a couple of names. You got guys like Dave Porter, who was also an All-American and All Big Ten performer, Andy Lightfoot, who was also an All Big Ten performer. But all of those guys didn't come to Iowa as the top tier talent, but they were developed over the course of their careers. Even though we were 1-10 to start off with, to be able to get that opportunity to finish out and go into that Orange Bowl. And after that 2002 season was a culmination of all that hard work that had been built by that program.
And it's also easy to tell guys to not play tight end when you have Dallas Clark, just sort of like, oh, okay, guys, maybe find another spot on the team where you can make an impact. But
that's true.
I saw that you had a wrestling background, and you certainly credited a lot of your ability to play well as a lineman to having that skill set as a high school athlete. And I saw the graphic that so many Iowa linemen, offensive, defensive side, have that wrestling background. Why do you think that? Well, of course, why did it help? Pretty obvious. But why do you think that more guys aren't pushed to do that when they're younger, considering the absolute advantages to understanding leverage that very clearly come with the sport?
Well, you have to be committed to being uncomfortable, because wrestling is not a comfortable sport. It's not a pretty sport. It's not a sport that gets a lot of notoriety. It gets a lot in certain areas of the country. Don't get me wrong. However, for the majority of the country, wrestling is not a sport that gets a lot of notoriety. However, it's interesting, that you mention it, because of the fact that, so many guys that have the opportunity to wrestle and take advantage of that really learn different forms of their body and learn how to move their body in ways that, the average individual can't. The average individual that may play basketball or baseball, just to pick a couple of other sports, may not necessarily understand leverage, like you mentioned. But being a wrestler, you definitely get to understand your center of gravity, and you understand how to balance a lot better. And those particular movements that you may use on a wrestling mat definitely transition a lot easier to what you do on a football field, more so than, say, posting somebody up, unless you're, say, a tight end of some sort. So as an offensive or defensive lineman, the fundamentals that come along with being a wrestler transition more so than any other sport.
As you said from the jump there, it's not an easy sport particularly to stick with, let alone try. What was it about you being in high school that you really had a passion there, something that you did stick with?
Well, it didn't start off that way. I was recommended to do it by the varsity football coaches, the defensive coordinator. He told me specifically, I don't know what your plans are after this football season, but I think that wrestling would be a great sport for you. You have some great size to you. You just really just need to get to know your body a little bit more, get a little bit more fundamentals about you. So going at it my freshman year, it was very difficult, but I enjoyed it because I rattled off some wins. And, the camaraderie that's involved in wrestling is completely different than in the football atmosphere. And I really just enjoyed it, took to it pretty quickly. And so I really, and the other part about it is one-on-one, there is nobody else. There's no teammate. It's somebody next to you to kind of pick up the slack if you mess up. If you get beat, you get beat. So that was a part of kind of the development of my overall development, as a football player, because kind of developed a dog type mentality for me, so to speak. So, yeah.
Well, that dog mentality, right? I mean, on top of having that now in your arsenal of weapons, like you mentioned, the team growing, everyone developing at Iowa, you yourself become an all-conference talent. Did you have an expectation to get drafted, just considering the meteoric rise that, you personally have, the team has? Did you feel like you should have heard your name called? And then just when that doesn't happen, how did you get your mind right to, attempt to make an NFL roster?
Well, I will say that I definitely at one point or another had some different voices telling me, particularly representation for me, telling me that I had opportunities, from the third round on to be a draft pick. I'm not sure exactly what may or may not have happened, other than the fact that there was a good number of guys that got drafted in the first and second round of the 2003 draft in terms of interior defensive linemen. So But outside of that, it just kind of you have an opportunity, and so I thought that was that I would hear my name, yes. However, when I did receive phone calls that there were different potential opportunities out there with different programs, I took the one that I felt like made the most sense for me, and just jumped at it. And so it was there's no rocket science to it. It was a difficult journey, no doubt, but I enjoyed it because it meant that much more to me because of the fact that I had to kind of work a lot harder than the average individual to kind of make it work.
And just for anyone that isn't as familiar with your story, if I have this right, you sign with Minnesota, released from Minnesota, then it's on to Detroit, and then Green Bay gets you from Detroit. So you just call it, maybe it's 12 to 18 months of your life where you're trying to make a roster. Then you're on your third roster, not knowing that it's going to work out in Green Bay. Do you have any sort of, if you can sort of consolidate that time? Anything in particular you'd say about just getting again your mind right, trying to block out the noise, doing the best you can while all the cast of characters and your location's changing?
So, Steve, I guess to sum it up, you kind of went into it pretty well. But yeah, being in Minnesota, being undrafted, making the open day roster after that training camp was all elation. Just having the opportunity to make the NFL roster. But then the following week to be released and figure out what was next and have the opportunity to come back again, because I was cut twice by the Vikings before I ended up in the interesting part about the Detroit situation was I was there for the entire offseason, and then I was released after the last cutdowns. I was actually brought back the following day because I cleared waivers and they were bringing me back for practice squad. And so I decided, I was good. I was going to be on practice squad for the Detroit Lions, all this good stuff. And that same day, I got a phone call, and they told me that unfortunately, another individual wasn't going to be ready for week one, so they had to bring somebody else in, and they needed to cut me again. So here I was, cut 4 times before I had even had the opportunity to play in a regular season game in the NFL, and I was seriously doubting myself. I was seriously doubting whether this was my calling. If this was something that I could do. I didn't see that. Especially after being cut 4 times within a year and not getting on the field, I didn't see that it was in the cards for me at the time. However, spoke with a couple of good friends as well as my wife, at the time girlfriend, and decided to take one more chance at it, one more stab at it. And the Green Bay Packers gave me a call, and I didn't look back from there. I took full advantage of my opportunity there.
And thank you for really providing more details there. And the reason why I think it's so important to talk about this is because it's so easy to say, oh, wow, a 12-year career must have been nice. But there's a time period at the very beginning where it is so uncertain, where you literally have there's no reason to believe it's going to work out. You have to make the commitment that you're going to pursue it no matter what, and just hope for the best. And of course it does work out, but just for anyone on the outside that just goes, oh, hey, must have been nice and easy for you. It's like, well, no, from the jump, there was nothing easy about it.
No, there's nothing easy about it. And I think that was a part of what made it that much more gratifying to be able to latch on and make the career that I did for myself. Because, there was definitely, and to be honest, at the time back in 2004, I believe it was, sitting in the general manager's office with the Detroit Lions and him telling me to my face that I just wasn't good enough to play in the NFL. That was a moment right there that I definitely looked deep within myself and asked that question. And so to kind of look at that situation itself and kind of spearhead that into what I felt was my dream and my destiny. I couldn't allow that person's thoughts or his opinion of me to direct me in terms of where I was going to take my career. And so, no, there was definitely. It was funny. I mean, it was never an easy time throughout the career. Never once was there an easy time. There was always a lot of difficulty, and there's always You know, in the NFL, there's always somebody ready to take your position. It's always somebody ready to take you. So there's never really a moment of time where you can just relax or be comfortable. You know, and that's how the great ones stay great. That's how the great ones become great and stay great. So
Absolutely.
That's how Tom Brady, who's a 6th-round draft pick, is the greatest of all time, because he's driven from and motivated.
Definitely. So, that being said, you finally, continue that tour of the NFC North to get to Green Bay, and you're there. You're part of the rotation at defensive tackle for like 5 years. Once you get past the almost, the fear of I could be cut at any day, and you are a bona fide contributor on that defense, at a certain point, was there ever a point where your mind shifted to, hey, I feel like I could be a starter. I feel like I should be getting more playing time. Did you ever recall a certain point in your career when you realized that your mind had sort of shifted about how you were approaching, what your role should be?
Yes. I would say that going into the 2004 or 5 season, I would say 5 season, I had the opportunity to play more. I was on the practice squad with the Packers in 2004 for the majority of that season. I came on at the end of the season, was signed and activated, and played a few games at the end of that season. And then the following season, I kind of came into my own, started playing some more games, started a few games, and that's when I realized I could definitely do this in this league. And there's always a lot of great talent. You know, the thing about the Packers is that we had a lot of great talent around us. Brady Jackson and Corey Williams, Johnny Jolly, Ryan Pickett, guys like that that came in. The good thing about it, like you said, is a rotation. Guys like Cullen Jenkins, just a lot of great talent. So I knew that if I can maintain in that room with guys like that, I can, I can do things in other rooms. So I did the best I could while I was there. You know, unfortunately, I wasn't able to stay in Green Bay, but what I was able to do was put enough great tape together that the Seattle Seahawks came and gave me a call. So I took my talents out west, and it's a part of that portion of it is the business side of it. But when you're in a room or you're part of a position where you get a chance to take advantage of playing time, and you fully do so, then great things happen, I guess you could say. So yeah, I've just kind of taken advantage of that throughout my career, just having the opportunity, and coaches and general managers giving me the opportunity to shine, and I've done so.
So to sort of highlight what might be, the way an outsider like myself might look at it, as the second hardest part of your career, if the first part's getting started, is, that after 2 very good years in Seattle, you start to really have to battle through some injuries. And if I have it right, it's a calf, ankle that requires, I believe, multiple surgeries, where you essentially are you're not playing a pro snap for 2 seasons. Mm-hmm. Ultimately resulting in your exit from Seattle. When you think about that part of your life, the continual rehab cycle, needing additional surgeries, now you're not even part of Seattle anymore. How do you stay committed to pursuing this career after you've already checked the boxes now? Like, hey, I did it. I proved I can do it. But I'd imagine that's such a long time to have to stick through and try to grind out, get back to being in tip-top shape. Do you recall what it was like just trying to battle through all that and staying committed to this path?
Oh man, it was tough. Trust me. That first year, 2011, when I was dealing with the surgeries, I'd had 5 surgeries. It was all ankle stuff, all left ankle, and it was brutal. Just trying to manage having to deal with that, having to use a scooter to move around. At the time, my wife was pregnant with our second child, so she had our second child. I was dealing with that kind of stuff, and it was just a lot. And then I remember at that time we were dealing with the NFL lockout, so it's not a situation where I was, in the confines of the Seattle Seahawks training rooms and working with our trainers. I was on my own trying to get stuff done and trying to get my ankle, who I'm a world-class athlete, trying to get a pretty serious, significant injury taken care of. And it was a difficult task to have to do during a time when I didn't have access to all the top tier athletic trainers that I needed, in that type of situation. So I struggled through that. Unfortunately, it did lead to my release from Seattle. And was in limbo for 2 years, a little bit over a year. Thankfully, I was still by Seattle. However, yeah, I was in that position, like I said, in limbo, so to speak. And it was a situation where I was working out on a regular basis, trying to keep myself in shape, keep myself prepared for whenever I got that phone call. It didn't come as soon as I was hoping. It didn't come at all, actually. And I was not sure. I thought it was over. I was in a position where I was at home, having been getting prepared for the majority of that 2012 season and not getting a phone call and just like, man, I don't know what I'm doing anymore. I have no clue why I'm doing this. It doesn't seem like it's coming through for me. And so as the story goes, after that 2012 season, I had made the decision to reach out to the Carolina Panthers myself. At the time, I'd had some correspondence with my agent at the time, and he had shown me some correspondence that he had between him and the one of the individuals that makes decisions for the Carolina Panthers. And so I went back through some emails, and I decided to give him a phone call. And I did. Just gave him a phone call randomly. And the wild part about it, it was right around the time of the Senior Bowl or one of those other post bowls. And so I didn't think I'd get a phone call from him, but I didn't think he would answer the phone call, I should say. And he actually answered the phone call. We had a conversation. I told him who I was. He knew who I was. And I told him, we'd actually moved from Seattle because we were living in Seattle at the time, and we moved to Charlotte area. And so it kind of worked out perfect that the Panthers at the time were rebuilding because they'd hired Dave Gettleman, who was the general manager and left the New York Giants. And they were looking for somebody to kind of fill the role in the middle along the defensive line. And so they gave me an opportunity. And so the rest was history. I got the second chance at my career, and I took full advantage of it.
Yeah, I mean, it had to be so satisfying to get out there after all that time to be able to show that you still have it. But that being said, like every pro athletic career, it had to end at some point. I'm pretty sure that the last game is the Super Bowl loss. I mean, what was it like for you having that be, where it ends and just that decision to, be done with it and have to decide where you want to spend your time and effort?
At some point you got to realize your body is it only has so much that it can handle. And for me, it was over. I physically, there was a number of things that was kind of leading to me just knowing that it was over for me. And so what you do is, you look for other things. And just like we talked about a little bit before we started recording, football is a part of what my legacy has been. However, it's not who I am. After I got done with my career, I started, mentioned at the beginning of this, the Cole Group, which was a company that I brainchild to do events, whether it be for nonprofits or individuals that were looking to raise money for whatever kind of events, whatever kind of interest that they have. And so I was able to work with the Charlotte area police department. I raised a good amount of money for them through a couple of different events. After that, I decided to go to broadcast school. Ended up with the interest of getting into some of the media department stuff with Carolina Panthers. And so that kind of has segued me into podcasting. And so that's kind of where I am now. I work with ADSN on down here in Charlotte, as well as do my own podcasts. I do a podcast currently that I feature. I would say retired alumni of the Iowa Hawkeyes, my alumni, my university, which I'm an alumni of. And then there's another podcast, which is Transition from the Trenches, which is kind of talks and is a take into every athlete's life. Well, I say every athlete because I talk to multiple athletes from different sports. And, regardless of whether you are an athlete that plays hockey, golf, football like myself, at some point you're going to be done. Some sports like hockey, or I should say like golf or say basketball, you can play a pickup game and do that beyond retirement if you do play in the professional ranks. However, sports like football, once you're done, you're done. And so everybody at some point has to make a transition away from what that sport is and talk. And it's not the easiest thing to do. So transition from the trenches was kind of therapeutic and giving guys kind of that area to talk about the fact that you struggle, regardless of who you are, regardless of however many years you played in the sport, regardless of however much money you have. None of those factor into, when you leave something that you've dedicated your life to for so long and that cannot, be replicated in your life. There's an area of struggle there. So that's what that one was from.
It's a hole in your schedule, a hole in your heart. I mean, yeah, that's going to be a hard thing to replace. I mean, I'd imagine it's at least a year or two to kind of get yourself sort of, in a spot where you can be okay. And that's mostly because guys generally don't get to leave on their own terms, right? It's just the phone doesn't ring, which just makes it so much harder because that's like a girl not returning your call, but magnify times like 1,000, when you don't, when it's not on your terms, it's just, so I'd imagine it's extremely therapeutic. And I'm really happy for you that you've been able to find things that you have some passion for to continue to, do things and just fill that spot in your life, that void that football used to hold.
No question. The biggest thing about it is that there's no quite ability for anybody to completely fill that. Like football was such a regimented portion of my life. There was so much that it took up, and there was so much that it gave to me. So there's nothing I can do to replace what I can within myself to give back. I currently serve on a couple of different boards. I currently serve as the president of our retired Charlotte chapter of retired players within our area. I will serve on a couple of boards within the University of Iowa's athletic department. So it's been really a great opportunity, since retirement. And honestly, since retirement, I'm a little bit more busy, in some areas. So it's been good in that regard, and finding ways to give back and finding ways to still be relevant and be a part of their different areas, especially back at Iowa, which has been really awesome to kind of just be a part of some of the inner workings that are going on within the athletic department there.
Yeah, that is awesome. And just, again, that legacy that Coach was able to build. I mean, how cool is it that, guys that played for him that, I'm sure that current players must think like, oh, this guy's so old. It's like, no, you played for the same coach. I mean, it's just that I just think it's special whenever you can go to a place and there's a tradition like that, particularly when guys like yourself are still involved in that community. I mean, that's just, that's what I would sign up for if I were in a spot to play, is to be in some sort of environment like that. So I think it's great. And I'm sure you're also getting a chance to enjoy time just, with the family.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I am. I have 3 children, 12, 10, and 6. I mean, 12, 10, and 8.
You got your
and
hands
so they're
full.
Yeah, I definitely do. But, and I do have the opportunity to watch them grow up and be a part of everything that's going on within their lives. So that's huge for me as well. But just like you mentioned, the University of Iowa, it's a great place where, clearly you have somebody who's at the helm that's been there for 20 some odd years. There's no reason that individuals that have been a part of that program can't go back and still be a part of it and still have their opportunities to be a part of what's going on right now. The best part about it is that there's been a family atmosphere for such a long time, and it's going to continue to grow. So being a part of the Alumni Association, being an alum who has his hands directly on that program it is fantastic. And I will continue to do everything within my power to help the program excel moving forward.
Definitely. Well, I want to end on this little thing I call the gauntlet. It's a couple quick hitter questions, but first, I just wanted to ask you. You've played on a lot of great teams, a lot of talented teammates. In your opinion, what has to happen for it to be a great defense? I mean, there has to be talented guys, but is there a certain element, a certain thing that you could pinpoint on what made some of those teams you were on better?
You cannot allow teams to run the football up the middle. If you got a secondary that's strong enough to reroute receivers, you can get pressure on the opposing quarterback a lot easier. And it helps when you have smart guys on your side. That helps.
Now, are we talking 4-3, 3-4? Does it matter?
It doesn't matter. Scheme is scheme. Players are players.
All right. Well, I alluded to it, so let's jump into the gauntlet. I got my first one for you teed up here. What's most important? Is it having the number one offense or the number one defense?
Number one defense.
No surprise there. Now, I know that you play with Jared Allen, so it's easy for me to lead with in terms of guys you've played with. Is there anyone you think should be in the Hall of Fame but is not in there yet? If it's not Jared Allen, is there anyone that jumps to mind?
Donald Driver.
All right. Very good receiver for a long time. But you don't really hear his name brought up. But I think there's just too many receivers. That's the problem.
You know, he is a Packer Hall of Famer. He's a Wisconsin Hall of Famer. And he also is a Dancing with the Stars first place winner. So he is my guy. He deserves to be in the Hall first chance he gets. There's always a lot of receivers, but my man put up the numbers. He carried the Green Bay Packers offense in the early 2000s. So and throughout the 2000s, not the early, just throughout the 2000s. So I think Donald Driver, he deserves it. There's a number of other guys like a Lofa Tatupu, guys like that. But that's the first guy I would say.
Lofa's been on the podcast. I will gladly stand up and support that claim any day of the week. Now, hardest running back to tackle, anything come in mind for, and even just offensive linemen in general? Did you have favorite matchups or battles that would pop up?
Well, no, they're all gray matter. Actually, I don't never remember a specific face or any. I asked that question, that similar question in terms of running backs to London Fletcher when I had him on my Transition from the Trenches show, and he said, his response was they all went down when he hit them. So there was not a specific running back that, and I kind of echo the same sentiments. However, there's one guy that was definitely a difficult guy to tackle, and that's Maurice Jones-Drew. He was so short and low center of gravity and just this little pinball guy. And you can hit him and wrap him up, but you can still still drag it a little bit. So I would say that guy was a tough guy. He was but like London said, they all go down when you hit him. So.
And I would also throw London's hat in the ring for Hall of Fame. Guys at least had 1,000 tackles. He was a savage in the middle forever.
There's no reason you compare his numbers against anybody in the Hall right now. There's no reason he shouldn't be there. He should have been there last year. He'll be up soon. He'll get his chance here soon. He deserved it. Well deserving that.
Absolutely. Now, was there a pregame ritual you had to stick to?
I like to go out and just catch the football. I like to, because I don't get a chance to do so in the game. So I like to go out and just run around and catch the football a little bit. So, I always go out and warm up and do all that other stuff. But I always like to just throw. It's like playing in the streets back at home. That's what I enjoy.
Players or scheme, which is most important?
Schemes get you beat. Honestly, they what schemes get you is what defensive scheme get you is offensive scheming against that scheme. Players will get you wins. I've seen a guy who just got inducted to the Hall of Fame, Charles Woodson, who would completely abandon the scheme and get interceptions just by knowing what to expect by a formation. He's a guy who would expect to see certain things by formation, and a lot of times quarterbacks would throw it to a spot, not expecting for him to be there because we ran a lot of man-to-man. They would expect him to run with his man, but a lot of times he would come off of his man and get interceptions. You look at his career, especially while he was in Green Bay. That guy was a freak in terms of just understanding what offenses were trying to do and being able to get to their quarterback. So, or I should say, get that ball. So, yeah, it's I would say man in terms of that question.
Yeah, I mean, Charles Woodson, say no more. Players every day. Well, man, to wrap this up, given everything we've talked about, I feel like there's a lot of implicit advice in there. But if we could end this on what's the best piece of advice you would give to a young student athlete out there, what would you say to them about trying to put together anything close to the career that you were able to?
Well, I would say that for any young athlete that wants to pursue their dreams, regardless of what sport, regardless of of where that level is, and just stick to what it is that you're trying to do, and understand that there's no shortcuts. There are no shortcuts to trying to get to that point of success. You know, you have to put the work in. You have to put it. It takes time, and you know, just remember the one thing that motivated me. Just to be honest with you, one thing that motivated me was I always thought that there was somebody else just like me that was out working. I always thought that. And so I always had my own workout equipment, and I always put some extra work in for myself, because that was always my motivation, was that in order for me to maintain this career, to maintain being a part of this dream that I've always wanted, I got to put the work in every single day, even when the season's over. Even my wife would get on me about, 2-3 weeks after our season's over with, like, why are you going back to start working out? Like, I can't sit idle for too long. I got to get to work. So always have that mentality that if you really want something, you have to work at it constantly and consistently.
There it is, from someone who's done it at the highest level. Colin, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Steve, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.